For oral answer. And the first question stands in the name of Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, what is the cost impact for the Earthquake Commission following Friday's High Court decisions, and what now is the total cost to the Crown of the Canterbury earthquakes?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, we don't yet know the impact of the High Court decision, but the judgment would be likely to shift some of the cost from private insurers towards EQC, so there's likely to be extra costs for the government. The important thing is that judgment does not affect Canterbury residents, as their claims will still be met. The total cost to the Crown of the earthquakes, including the increased EQC liability estimate issued last week, is currently around $12.9 billion. That excludes any impact from the court decision.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he recall telling this House on June 16 this year that had the costs of the earthquake been larger, raising an earthquake levy is something he could have looked at? And now, given that the costs are in the order of $13 or possibly $14 billion, will he now look at it?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd distinguish between two sorts of costs to the government. One is the general government contribution, for instance, to the purchase of homes in the red zone, and those are over and above any insurance claims, and those are being financed by borrowing, because that spreads across the cost across all taxpayers. The insurance-related costs, which are the ones that are now looking significantly larger, have always been financed by the EQC levy, and it's of course possible in the future that those levies would increase, because I think any increased insurance costs should fall on those who benefit from it, and that is the insured party.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he accept that his decision not to raise an earthquake levy will overall lead to greater levels of government debt?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, any government at any time has the opportunity to put taxes up, which is what the earthquake levy would be. The government made the decision, which it stands by, that an increase in taxes at the time of a significant earthquake and a recession would not have been helpful for the economy.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he agree with AA Insurance Head of Corporate Affairs, Suzanne Walton, who recently said that in light of the earthquake cost blowout, the government might have to seriously look at the Green Party's proposal to restock the emergency fund through a levy?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd again go back to the distinguishing between different costs. The general contribution of government to the earthquake recovery is funded through debt. That cost is therefore spread across all New Zealanders. But costs related to insurance, in the government's view, should fall on those who are insured. Now that the EQC fund is likely to be cleaned out, then of course it's quite possible EQC levies will be considerably higher, and those would be borne by homeowners.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Is he aware that the Christchurch City Council is raising a 1.76% earthquake levy on ratepayers? And is it not a cruel paradox that the very people least able to pay for the levy, the ratepayers of Christchurch, will have to pay one when the rest of us won't?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the rest of us are contributing. There's a government fund of $5.5 billion, and all of that $5.5 billion will ultimately be met by the taxpayer. The government's working closely with the Christchurch City Council to look at how to achieve fair sharing of the costs between the council and the government. And we'll continue those discussions because decisions haven't been made, but certainly part of our consideration is the ability of Christchurch ratepayers to pay.
The Honourable John Biscown, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister of Finance. Would the government be more or less able to fund the earthquake recovery if government spending as a proportion of GDP had been reduced to 2005 levels of 29% over the last three budgets, as ACT proposed last month?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, we'd be more able to pay.
Supplementary.
The Honourable John Biscowen.
How many more billion-dollar increases in the cost of rebuilding Christchurch will it take for this government to realise the need to reduce government spending as a proportion of GDP to avoid New Zealand becoming the next Greece, Ireland or Portugal?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, we would hope there aren't too many more multi-billion-dollar additional costs of the earthquake. The government has been working to strike a balance between getting New Zealand in shape to deal with external shocks on the one hand, which means controlling our debt and getting our deficits down, but on the other hand, meeting the very real costs of the earthquake and the recession, and to the extent possible, protecting the most vulnerable through that period.
Question number 2, Pesata Samlo Tuyenga.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to